WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange could face even more charges.
He's from Australia, not like France, right?
I know, but I love the Assange. We got to just say it when we want to. All right, following his arrest in London, I want to know if the president knows about WikiLeaks or not. Michael Avenatti, he caught another case, and the Trump administration reportedly pushed to have immigrant families released into sanctuary cities.
Team Rising is here. We have Daniela Gibbs-Legere. She's the Executive Vice President for Communications and Strategy at the Center for American Progress. Also, Mica Mosbacher back in the House, a political strategist and member of the Trump 2020 Advisory Board. Welcome to both of you. Thank you.
So I say it like that because he's sort of like an international man of mystery.
Oh, no, I get it. You make it sound like he's got like a cigarette and a holder and a beret.
But he does. You can imagine him walking around that embassy with a cigarette and a beret.
Sort of a James Bond type character, shaken but not
villain.
stirred.
Could be a villain, exactly.
He definitely thinks so. So Trump has said some interesting stuff about WikiLeaks in the past. Let's just catch up on that.
WikiLeaks. I love WikiLeaks.
This WikiLeaks stuff is unbelievable. It tells you the inner heart. You got to read it.
It's been amazing what's coming out on WikiLeaks.
I don't know anything about him, really. I don't know much about him. I really don't.
I know nothing about WikiLeaks. It's not my thing.
It's amazing how the president says things that aren't true, even though it's obvious what the truth is.
Mica, what do we think about the president's take on WikiLeaks?
What's up with this guy?
Well, first of all, that was during the campaign, so that's campaign rhetoric. It's political theater to some degree. Now that he has been indicted, it's a whole different story. And I mean, you know, he's been, in the Ecuadorian embassy for 7 years. Kicking around a soccer ball from what I understand, and, you know, I guess going a little bit crazy. The question comes down to, of course, is he a legitimate journalist? And it is interesting because he was part of the Australian Journalist Union, and he did receive several awards for being a journalist. So the question is, did he, you know, commit conspiracy? And I guess that's going to remain to be seen. But a lot of these indictments are kind of a wind-up to the Mueller report, which is interesting, because the statute of limitations was running, for example, on this, and so they unsealed it recently.
Well, it does make us, I think, want to know what was in the Mueller report even more, because now that we've got Assange back in the custody of international law enforcement, I think it would be helpful for people to evaluate this, knowing what the intelligence says.
Right, exactly. And look, the House, I believe, unanimously said that the full report should be released. You know, Trump is saying that the report exonerates him. Well, if it does, then let's just get it out there. Let's have it open. I think there are a lot of things that people may be surprised that are in the report, and just because it doesn't necessarily lead to criminal charges doesn't mean that there aren't bad things that we, the American people, need to know about what has been going on with this administration or even with the campaign. And I just have to say, Trump has a record of lying about things that he has said previously on tape, on camera. He just doesn't care.
Which then makes you think, like, how can we trust him on the other things that we can't see, because we know that he won't tell the truth on things that we can verifiably prove?
It's one approach for sure.
That's one way to approach government.
That's one way to say it. So we've got a couple of other criminal issues that have come up here, by the way. Let's start with Michael Avenatti. Michael Avenatti, for those who don't remember, which is probably nobody who was watching this, is the Stormy Daniels lawyer / Julie Swetnick, third accuser of Kavanaugh lawyer, who at one point, and Mica, this is something I love to remind people, was being talked about as a possible Democratic nominee for the presidency, that he was going to run. I'm not saying that he was going to win.
Okay.
I think he was talking.
Yeah, I was like, who's talking?
It was on the cover of Politico, folks. Avenatti 2020. This is a thing. We can all try to, people in this town can try to walk this back. Mica, this was a real thing for a while because he was so anti-Trump. Turns out he stole $4 million from a guy stuck in a wheelchair who was his client.
Yes, a paraplegic, no less. And CNN.
Wait. Has that been proven?
That is alleged,
These
but I
are
have a feeling.
alleged.
I have a feeling they're going to prove this one.
Yes, especially since he kept telling his client, apparently, that he had not been paid yet. So you know, the client gave up what his
Does
disability.
this surprise you at all,
yes,
Mica?
Allegedly. Well, look, CNN made him a media darling. He was on the air over 200
definitely a CNN
times.
darling.
And in my opinion, if you're going to go on the air, you better be somewhat squeaky clean. You know, guys.
DC.
I know.
Fox
I mean,
never has people on air
No.
who turn out to be pretty scurrilous, right? That never happens.
Well, they did call him a creepy porn lawyer, so I think they sort of called it as it is.
So is it better to be a porn lawyer or to pay off a porn star?
You know.
Right. I mean, you know, it's like you got Trump in the White House. I just don't know how much aspersions we can cast. Look, Michael Avenatti is like, from what I read this morning, is a really creepy, awful person. And nobody who seriously thinks about Democratic politics actually thought that he would run and make a difference. So like in his mind, and maybe in some media minds, that it might have been interesting, but I just want to be like really clear. We're talking about somebody who's like on the periphery of politics and not like somebody like the President of the United States. So I just want to like, I don't want people to start doing some false equivalency here. He's apparently a dirtbag.
So for the first time, though, for the first time, we did have a Democrat who has been indicted as people have been investigating all these questions. And Danielle, I just have to ask you, I would fully expect the President of the United States to weaponize this fact soon. Is this going to be a problem for Democrats, having Greg Craig, Barack Obama's former White House counsel, be indicted?
I think that remains to be seen, right? You have to let this play out. But I don't think the president's necessarily going to go out there and try to weaponize this when, 17 people close to Trump or the campaign have already been indicted out of the Mueller report. Like, what standing does Trump have to then turn and say, oh, look, well, there's one person over here.
Including the Russians who will never actually show up in the U.S. court. It's not actually 17 people that work for
yes,
Trump.
there were. Yeah,
I said we're tied to.
The Russians are not actually tied to Trump.
Well, let's release the full Mueller report, okay? Let's do
that. He's got his campaign chairman. These aren't insignificant humans.
I'm not saying that. I'm
Exactly.
not 17 of them, but.
Well, I think it's interesting, though. You know, Avenatti was a useful idiot for the Democrats when he was, you know, using Julie Swetnick to
try to take down Kavanaugh.
To take down Kavanaugh, first of all, and Stormy Daniels to try to sully the president. This happened, of course, before he was in office. So now I think it's interesting that the Democrats are now trying to distance themselves from Avenatti.
I don't think that's true.
Paula Jones happened before Bill Clinton was in office. That didn't stop Republicans from talking about that every single day.
Well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander.
Okay.
But Greg Craig, does this? I think that this is kind of a who cares situation. I do think it's interesting that apparently Mueller wasn't the one who brought this charge. It was a different federal prosecutor. So in the course of this guy lying, Mueller's like, well, we're not gonna get you for lying. We have to get people around Trump for lying.
Well, and also it was the fact that he wasn't registered as an agent representing.
Well, he lied about why he didn't.
That,
yeah.
and I think that
like the National Security Advisor.
Well,
except he wasn't the National Security Advisor or in an administration when this happened.
But I think the overarching
we have to
point.
focus on the actual thing, the actual news item we're talking about here, guys.
I'm just saying.
There's a lot of stuff. We just like, do you know what happened at Trump Taj Mahal in the 80s? We're talking about this. This is a thing.
A former Obama official, the current
No,
National Security Advisor.
I think that this is the first Democrat that's caught up in this thing, and I think this is kind of pretty insignificant, all
that's the
things
point.
considered. But I think it's because there's two tiers of justice.
But also though I think.
Oh yeah, and Republicans are the one on the bottom end of that math.
But there's
Hillary Clinton can only violate the Espionage Act 100 times before they decide that maybe they're going to actually have a problem
exactly.
with it.
And there's an overarching point here is that the fact is that now Mueller, or as part of this whole investigation, has charged a Democrat. And it will be interesting to see what the Democrats say, because they've circled the wagons around Mueller the whole time. Now, after these bar hearings the last 2 days in front of the House and the Senate, it's almost like Pelosi is painting him as a political hack.
And one other interesting point about this, Mica, is that there's this whole storyline because people were freaked out about Russia, because Russia's the scariest place in the world and all that. Greg Craig, Democrat, worked for Obama, chief White House counsel in the first year. He was working for a Russian-backed Ukrainian oligarch. Oh my gosh, you mean people do somewhat shady things abroad as political operatives for a lot of money? Yes. Not just people who work for Trump, not just people that happen to be out of favor right now in D.C. People do this all over the place, including the members of the Podesta family, from what I understand. Which I
Just
think
think
Okay,
a lot
sure
of people who work for Trump, though.
Right, exactly. And yes, there are a lot of people,
Whoa.
shockingly, there are a lot of people in #ThisTown who work for unscrupulous people or people that we might find to be a little unsavory. The question is, are they doing this to advance a particular goal, to affect an election at the
that
behest
question
of
has
something?
been answered, and the answer is no.
You know what? I'd like to see the full report
The
because
answer is no.
You know it's not
you know
true
what? That
criminally.
is not true.
We don't
exactly.
we do not know the counterintelligence implications
There
of
are-
what these people
No,
do.
Exactly.
the standard you're setting up is that it hasn't been proven criminally. They don't even have probable cause to actually bring a charge.
Well, we don't know. We haven't
don't
seen the
know.
report.
We haven't
As
seen the
Barr
report.
said in his testimony, he gave
Oh, 'cause
the
he's credible.
bottom
Oh, right,
line.
because
he
Barr-
is credible.
Why? What makes you think he's
Absolutely.
credible?
He was put in
He's-
place because he already said that he was trashing the Mueller report before he was even put in place.
Wait,
Because
this is
we're-
getting crazy. Mueller didn't bring charges
No.
for collusion. There's no collusion. Like, we're past this now. This is now this fantasy is over.
Mueller
is there
did
some
not
evidence
come-
of obstruction that somebody might try to make a case? That's a different thing. But
We
Mueller
don't know
did
if-
come to a
we-
conclusion.
Hold on. We don't
on
know if there's
collusion.
evidence of collusion. We know there's not enough evidence to get a criminal charge.
Well, if there's not enough evidence for a criminal charge, what is there evidence for?
And also, there was no underlying, the fact that there was no underlying case. How can you
By the way,
have an
conspiracy
obstruction
is
of
the
justice?
easiest thing that exists for
Yeah,
people in the federal
exactly.
government to try to prove. So if you're not going to try to get somebody on conspiracy, which is what it is, not collusion,
Correct.
you got nothing. You got nothing. It's just the way it
Collusion,
works.
delusion.
Collusion,
That's-
all right.
that's clever.
So now,
Let's
Mica,
release the
we're going to have to
report.
batten down the hatches for a second because apparently someone in the White House was saying something about transferring people to sanctuary cities to punish the cities, which is interesting because sanctuary cities tend to be full of migrants anyway, and it's probably where I'm being serious, where a lot of them probably would want to go. I mean, you're talking about major urban centers with a lot of jobs. I see this and I think, who said this? Who did this? This doesn't make
Exactly. Name
Stephen
names.
Miller would be my guess.
Name names. I mean, this is
Stephen
again,
Miller, he just
You can dislike Miller, but I think Miller is too sharp-minded to think that this was an idea that would work.
No,
in
but
any, in any
I think
capacity.
Miller was cruel enough to decide to try to put Danielle.
This isn't even cruel. It doesn't make any sense as a
No.
punishment. You're going to drop people off in Los Angeles who just came to the border. They'll probably be like, okay. I mean, what's the? I mean,
It's not about being cruel to the people. It's about trying to make a political point with the Democrats who run these cities to say, look, your city is being overrun by all these dangerous brown people. That's what he's trying to do.
I mean, there's the idea that a few thousand people being dropped in any major sanctuary city is something that people would notice. I think is just look. This is a terrible idea.
But it's
dumb that
manipulative.
anyone said it.
Right.
But it's so dumb that I'm like, I don't even understand how this could be a thing.
No
that
one
anyone
said
would
these
think.
people in the White House are the smartest people on the planet, but it doesn't mean that they don't have ill and evil intent when it comes to demonizing immigrants.
This is a leak from DHS, according to the press.
Exactly.
I would be very curious to know who this came from.
all hat, no cattle. Is first
Exactly.
of all.
Which what the lady said. That's right. All hat, no cattle. I'm with you on this one.
And secondly, this Democratic narrative that Trump is cruel.
Wait. Well, I'll let you
Wait, let her finish. Let her finish.
Let you finish.
May I
I'll let you
finish?
Yes.
That Trump is cruel because he put people in cages. Photographer Ross Franklin, June 18th, 2014, in Arizona, photographed children in the so-called cages. It was under the Obama administration. These are wire partitions designed actually to protect the children from the human traffickers or other potential dangers, or that could be adversarial to the children. But what is more compassionate is talking about a legislative solution. And if the Democrats would work with Republicans and get rid of chain migration and the asylum laws and those other loopholes that are allowing those individuals to game the system, that would be far more compassionate and less cruel than talking about the problem.
What's less cruel is not taking children away from their mothers. And I think the President of the United States has shown that he can be a pretty petty individual. We saw him fire the FBI director while he was on a road trip to keep him from being able to take his airplane flight back from that trip when he was there. They fired Reince Priebus before he got to Air Force to Andrews Air Force Base, and then kicked his car out of a motorcade. The president he took the Sean Spicer to Rome. He's a practicing Catholic who was in Rome and refused to let him meet the Pope because he was mad at him about something. The president is a petty man, and I think what he does is manipulate other humans in order to make these petty political points.
On immigration?
Yeah. Well, I just think it is an important point. The president has a long record of being a very petty individual. But back to immigration. Yes, there are pictures from the Obama administration where there were kids that were being held, but their policy was not to separate children, and they tried to rectify it, where you have this president who thought that it would be some sort of deterrent to keep people from coming here. These are people who, for the most part, are not coming here out of ill will. They are coming for legitimate asylum reasons. And if Republicans were an honest, broker when it came to the immigration issue, like they were, many years ago, I think we could have had a solution. We could have had a solution under the Obama administration, but John Boehner did not want to put a bill that would have passed the House because he was afraid of a portion of his caucus. And that tiny portion of his caucus is now running the entire party when it comes to immigration policy.
Just one note, they're not coming for legitimate asylum reasons. 90% plus of them, according to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, will not actually get asylum. They're being told what to say about asylum. And if credible fear is I'm from Honduras or I'm from El Salvador, then those entire countries would be able to claim asylum in this country because they have no specific credible fear standard that they can prove in immigration court, which is why about 60% of them don't show up for the immigration hearings they're supposed to have, at which point they become illegal aliens in the country and are supposed to be deported, but we all know they're not going to be.
So the answer is to cut the funding that would help keep them in their country by solving some of the problems.
The idea that Central American countries are going to somehow become beacons of law and order and economic prosperity based on U.S. aid is preposterous.
But cutting off the aid altogether doesn't help at all.
There is no could be a lever to get the government to be more.
Cutting off the aid is effort by the President of the United States to create more disruption because what he wants is more chaos at the border because it's a good political point.
I spoke to an investigative journalist who was just in Honduras 2 days ago. The government of Honduras and the media there is actually now saying, yeah, go. It's a good idea. Go for it. They're actually not helpful partners in this whatsoever. So, aid goes to the government. It does not go to we're not feeding the Honduran people with our foreign aid in any meaneful way. We have not solved immigration. But see, all your stuff about Trump being so petty, if he sees this, he's going to be very mad at you, Joe. He's going to kick you out of the motorcade. Ladies, thank you so much for brightening up our days.
Thank you so much for
having all of your wisdom. We appreciate it.
All right, coming up, he's a marketing guru and the inventor of an infamous knife.
My conversation with PRI Media Chief Operating Officer Ed Valenti when Rising continues.